Captain Soren stood at the helm of the sleek, black ship, staring out at the dark expanse of space. His crew was ready. His team of soldiers, handpicked for their skill and bravery, had trained for months in secret. Yet, despite their preparation, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. The mission they were about to undertake wasn't just dangerous, it was controversial. The Galactic Council had ordered that no human intervention should occur. The rebels, though once allies in the fight for freedom, were now seen as lost causes. The Empire had crushed their resistance, and most believed it was better to leave them to their fate. It was a hard decision, but one the Council felt necessary to avoid further bloodshed. But Soren disagreed. He wasn't the type to sit back while others suffered, not when it was within his power to help. He knew the risks. If the mission failed, Earth would likely face the wrath of the Empire. It could mean war, but he also knew one thing. There was no way he could stand by and do nothing. "Captain, the fleet is ready," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice steady as he approached the command center. Harris was a loyal officer, a man of few words, but he shared the captain's sense of duty. He had fought alongside Soren in previous battles, and when the captain had ordered the team to act, Harris had never questioned it. Soren turned to him and nodded. "Good. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Everyone knows their role. We go in, we rescue who we can, and we leave. No hesitation." As the ship's engines hummed to life, the weight of the decision settled on Soren's shoulders. He wasn't just leading soldiers into a war zone. He was leading them into an unknown future, a future where their actions could ignite a galactic conflict. The mission was simple on paper: land on Sandros, find the rebels, and get them off the planet before the Empire could arrive. But things rarely went according to plan. Soren knew this was no ordinary rescue operation. These weren't just any rebels they were saving. The Empire had left them to die, and now, against all odds, the humans had made the choice to defy the Empire's will. Soren stood in front of the viewing window, watching the stars streak by. His mind kept returning to the message the rebels had received, the faint, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, there were those out there who still cared. He thought of the leader of the rebels, Zora. He had never met her, but he had read the reports. A fierce leader, someone who had inspired her people, someone who refused to surrender, even when everything was lost. "This is bigger than just saving lives," Soren muttered to himself. "It's about doing what's right." As the ship entered the atmosphere of Sandros, the crew fell silent. The planet loomed beneath them, an unforgiving world filled with the scars of battle. The rebels were out there somewhere. The humans had to find them, protect them, and bring them home. But would the rebel leader, Zora, trust them enough to accept their help? "Captain," Harris interrupted his thoughts, "we're close to the drop zone, ready to deploy." Soren took one last breath, his heart heavy with the weight of the mission. "Let's make sure no one is left behind. Not on our watch." With that, the doors of the ship opened, and the human soldiers prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. They were ready to fight, to save, and to prove that sometimes doing the right thing meant facing the impossible. The planet Sandros was a harsh, unforgiving world. The surface was covered in endless stretches of dry, cracked soil, scorched by the twin suns that beat down relentlessly. Dust storms rolled across the barren landscape, reducing visibility to mere meters. For the humans and rebels, there was no comfort to be found here, only survival. Captain Soren's ship descended slowly through the thick atmosphere, its engines humming softly. The massive vessel shook slightly as it hit turbulence, but Soren kept his gaze focused on the planet below. He had seen many dangerous worlds, but Sandros was different. The planet felt dead, like it had been abandoned by the very stars themselves. Landing in 10 seconds, Harris's voice crackled over the comms. Soren nodded, his fingers gripping the armrest of his seat. The ship was flying low now, its sensors scanning for any signs of the survivors. The desert stretched out in every direction, but there was a glimmer of hope, an old rebel beacon flickering in the distance. It was weak, but it was enough to guide them. The ship touched down with a soft thud, its landing gear sinking into the soft sand. The ramp lowered with a hiss, revealing the desolate world outside. The harsh wind whipped through the opening, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and decay. Soren stood and motioned for his team to follow. "Move out. Stay close, and keep your weapons ready," he ordered. The soldiers filed out of the ship, their boots crunching in the dust as they formed a tight formation. The rebel survivors were somewhere out there, but finding them in this vast wasteland would be no easy task. The planet's terrain was unpredictable, with hidden ravines and deep canyons that could swallow a person whole. But the humans had trained for this. They were prepared for anything. As they moved forward, the silence of the planet was oppressive. There was no sound except for the howling wind and the crunch of their boots. Soren couldn't help but feel the weight of the planet pressing down on him. It was as if the planet itself was trying to crush their hope. After hours of trekking, they finally found something. A small, makeshift shelter hidden among the rocks. It was barely visible from a distance, but the humans' sharp eyes had picked it out. The shelter looked abandoned, with signs of recent activity, scattered supplies, burned-out campfires, and signs of a struggle. Soren knelt down, inspecting the area. The scent of blood lingered in the air, and a chill ran down his spine. The rebels had fought to the last, but it seemed like they had been pushed to the brink of extinction. They had been betrayed, and now they were just trying to survive in a place that offered them nothing. "Captain," Harris said, kneeling beside him, "we're close. There are signs of life. They're still out there." Soren's eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. He could feel the tension building, the weight of the mission becoming heavier with every passing minute. The rebels were out there, but would they trust the humans enough to come forward? "We find them, and we get them out of here," Soren said quietly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The team moved forward, more determined than ever. The wind howled, but the humans pushed on. They had a mission, and they would see it through, no matter the cost. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain of Sandros. The group of human soldiers moved cautiously through the wasteland, their eyes scanning every corner, every crevice. They had come for the rebels, but finding them on a planet this vast and hostile was no easy task. Captain Soren's heart raced with each step. He had no idea what to expect. The rebels had been abandoned, betrayed by their own allies, and their survival was uncertain. But Soren wasn't the kind of man to leave anyone behind, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. The message had said to stay alive, and they had kept that promise. Now it was time to honor it. "We're close," Soren murmured, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Stay sharp." The team moved forward, their weapons held at the ready. They reached the base of a rocky cliff, and suddenly, there it was, a flash of movement. Something, or someone, was just ahead. "Hold up," Lieutenant Harris whispered, his hand raised in a signal to stop. The team froze in place, their eyes searching the shadows. Then, from behind a large boulder, a figure emerged. At first it was just a blur in the distance, but as it stepped into the fading light, the soldiers could make out the silhouette of an alien woman. She was tall and lean, her features marked by the unmistakable signs of someone who had lived through a battle. Dust clung to her skin, and her eyes glinted with caution. Soren's pulse quickened. This had to be one of the rebels. "Who goes there?" The woman called, her voice strong but wary. She gripped a weapon in her hands, ready to defend herself if necessary. Soren stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We're human soldiers. We've come to rescue you." The woman didn't lower her weapon. Instead, she narrowed her eyes, clearly unsure whether to trust him. "Rescue us," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why should I trust you? You're the enemy." "We're not your enemy," Soren replied, taking another step closer, his voice steady. "We've been sent to get you out of here, Away from the Empire. We didn't abandon you." For a long moment, the woman said nothing. She studied Soren and his team, weighing their words. Her eyes shifted to the group of soldiers behind him, and then back to Soren. Finally, she spoke. "You really are human, aren't you? The ones who fight the Empire." Soren nodded. "That's us. We don't leave our allies behind." The woman hesitated for a moment before lowering her weapon, though she didn't fully relax. "I'm Zora," she said, her voice still cautious, "leader of the rebel faction here on Sandros. And I don't know if I can trust you. But if you're really here to help." She trailed off, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Soren stepped closer, extending his hand. "We're not leaving anyone behind. Let us help you." Zora looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, then nodded. She reached out and shook it, her grip strong, despite the weariness that showed in her eyes. "You better be telling the truth, human," she said quietly, "because if you aren't, I won't hesitate to make you regret it." Soren's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "You have my word." In that moment, despite the harsh environment and the dire circumstances, something changed. The human and alien were no longer enemies. They were allies, bound by a shared purpose: survival. And as the wind howled around them, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the mountains, a reminder that the battle was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Zora allowed herself to believe that there was still hope. The sky above Xandros was darkening, with thick clouds rolling in from the distant horizon. The wind grew stronger, whipping the dust into a frenzy as Captain Soren and Zora led the group toward a hidden rebel base. The humans had finally made contact, but the real challenge was just beginning. The Empire's forces were already on their way, and time was running out. "We have to move faster," Soren said, his voice sharp. "The Empire could be here any moment." Zora nodded, her face hard with resolve. Despite her cautious nature, she could see that the humans had a plan, and she was willing to trust them, for now. But every part of her rebel leader instinct screamed to keep fighting, to keep hiding. She had led her people through so much pain and betrayal. Could she really trust these strangers? "We have a small window," Soren continued. "The Empire will land on the eastern side of the planet first. That gives us one chance to escape." Zora's eyes narrowed as she looked at the distant cliffs. The plan seemed impossible, but it was all they had. "Where are the ships?" she asked. "Not far," Soren answered. "We've got a shuttle hidden in the canyon to the north. We'll take you to safety." Zora looked over her shoulder at her people, tired, dirty, and wounded, yet still determined. "And if we don't make it to your shuttle?" she asked, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of what had happened. "What then?" Soren met her gaze, his expression serious. "We make it." The sound of distant explosions rumbled through the air, reminding them all that time was running out. The Empire's forces were getting closer. There was no more time for hesitation. With a final nod from Zora, the humans and rebels began their march through the canyon. The wind howled around them, and the rocky terrain grew more treacherous with every step. The air felt thick, charged with the tension of what was to come. It was a race against time, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As they reached the base of the canyon, a sudden noise stopped them in their tracks, a high-pitched hum, followed by the thud of boots hitting the ground. The Empire's soldiers had arrived. "Get to cover," Soren shouted. His team quickly split into two groups, taking up defensive positions on either side of the canyon. They fired at the Empire's soldiers, who were now advancing through the rocks, their weapons raised. Zora's hand instinctively went to the weapon at her side, but she hesitated. She wasn't a soldier, not like the humans. Still, she had led her people in battles before, and now she had to do it again. "Stay close to the humans," she called to her people. "Follow their lead." Soren watched as his soldiers took out the first few enemies with precision. The human strategy was clear. They were holding their ground to give the rebels a chance to escape. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Harris shouted from the front, signaling for the rebels to follow him. Zora looked back one last time at the canyon, the last battlefield her people had known. The Empire would stop at nothing to hunt them down, but today they had a chance. It was a slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. "Move," Soren called. The humans and rebels quickly sprinted toward the shuttle, firing back at the approaching Empire soldiers. Every step felt like an eternity, but they were getting closer to freedom. As they reached the shuttle, the doors opened, and the crew inside waved them in. The first group of rebels jumped into the ship, followed by Soren's team. Zora was the last aboard, her eyes scanning the horizon one final time before she stepped inside. "Go," she shouted to the pilot. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and within moments they were lifting off the ground, soaring into the sky. The planet of Sandros, with its endless deserts and broken promises, began to fade beneath them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zora allowed herself to relax. They had done it. The rebels were alive, and they owed their survival to the humans who had come for them when no one else would. The shuttle ascended through the atmosphere of Sandros, the dust and smoke below receding into the distance. The rebel survivors sat in tense silence, the weight of what they had just escaped still heavy in the air. The hum of the engines was a constant reminder of the danger they had narrowly avoided. Yet, as the shuttle flew farther from the planet, something was amiss. Zora, seated near the front, looked at the group of humans who had risked everything to save them. Captain Soren was seated across from her, his face calm, but his eyes betrayed the stress of the mission. He had led them to safety, but Zora couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She glanced at her people. Most of them were exhausted, physically and mentally drained, but there was one among them who caught her eye. Kaldor, a young rebel who had once been an officer in their forces, was sitting in the back, his gaze fixed on the floor. Zora had known him for years, and she had always trusted him. But lately, something had seemed off about him. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling. Soren leaned over to her, his voice low. "What's on your mind?" Zora glanced up, meeting his eyes. "It's Kaldor. He's acting strange. He's been distant ever since we left the planet." Soren looked over his shoulder at Kaldor, but his face remained neutral. "He's just shaken up. We all are." Zora wasn't convinced. She'd seen Kaldor act like this before, after their last big battle, when the Empire had trapped them in a corner. He hadn't been himself since. She nodded slowly but didn't say anything more. The tension in the shuttle grew as they traveled farther into space. The rebels were silent, their minds still processing the escape. The humans were doing their best to comfort them, offering food and water, but the relief of their survival was quickly being overshadowed by a sense of unease. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the ship, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps. The lights flickered and then went out, leaving them in darkness. Panic spread among the passengers, but Captain Soren remained calm, his voice cutting through the confusion. "Everyone stay calm," he ordered, his voice firm. "Harris, what's going on?" Lieutenant Harris's voice came back over the comms, shaken but clear. "There's an energy breach in the engine room. Someone's tampered with the power supply. It's going to blow if we don't fix it." Zora's heart sank. They were too close to safety to be caught in a trap now. She felt a chill run down her spine, her suspicions about Kaldor flaring up once again. Before she could speak, a voice from the back of the shuttle broke through the tension. "It's him," a rebel whispered. "Kaldor. He's the one who did it." Zora's eyes went wide. "What?" She turned to look at Kaldor, who was now standing up, his face cold and distant. The young rebel's hand rested on his weapon, and there was no trace of fear in his eyes, only something darker. Kaldor met Zora's gaze, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "You should have known this was going to happen, Zora. You were too trusting. The humans weren't here to save us. They're just using us." The air in the shuttle seemed to freeze, and for a moment, Everything was silent except for the hum of the failing engines. Zora felt a sharp pang in her chest. Her instincts had been right. Kaldor had betrayed them. But why? What was his true allegiance? Soren's voice rang out, cold and commanding. Get him to the back of the shuttle. Now. But Kaldor wasn't finished. You're all fools if you think you've escaped. The Empire has plans for Earth, and I'm just the messenger. You should have stayed on Sandros. You've only made it worse. Zora's heart raced as she stood, her hand reaching for her own weapon. The shuttle was now on the brink of disaster, and the worst part was, the enemy wasn't just out there anymore. The threat was in their midst. Captain, she said sharply, what do we do now? Soren's eyes were dark with resolve. We fix this. We don't let him win. As Kaldor was pushed to the back of the shuttle, the human soldiers quickly set to work on the failing systems. But Zora couldn't shake the feeling that this betrayal was only the beginning. They had escaped Sandros, but the real battle, one of trust, survival, and loyalty, was just beginning. And in the vastness of space, there was no telling who might be watching. The shuttle shook violently as it sped through space, the emergency lights casting an eerie red glow on the walls. The energy breach had been fixed, but the sense of dread still hung heavy in the air. Kaldor's betrayal had left a bitter taste, and Zora couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't just from the Empire. It was within their own ranks. Captain Soren paced the small control room, his mind racing. They had managed to keep the shuttle intact, but they weren't out of danger yet. The Empire had no mercy, and with Kaldor's information, they knew exactly where the humans and rebels were headed. We're not safe yet, Soren said, his voice calm but filled with tension. They'll be coming for us. Zora nodded, still processing everything. Kaldor's betrayal had come as a shock, but they didn't have time to dwell on it. They had to focus on the immediate threat. The Empire was closing in. She looked around at the survivors, the rebels who had once fought for a free galaxy, and the humans who had risked their lives to save them. They were a team now, but that bond was fragile. One crack, and it could all fall apart. Lieutenant Harris, who had been in charge of the ship's systems, approached Soren with a grim expression. Captain, we're picking up multiple enemy ships on the scanners. They're getting closer. Fast. Soren's hand tightened around the controls. How long until they're in range? 10 minutes, maybe less, Harris replied. We don't have much time. The captain turned to Zora. We need to get to a nearby asteroid field. It's our only chance to hide. We can make it there, but we'll have to move fast. Zora's heart raced. She knew the asteroid field was their only chance, but it was a risky maneuver. They'd have to navigate through narrow gaps, relying on their limited resources to avoid detection. If they failed, the Empire would have them within minutes. We don't have a choice, Zora said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. Do what you have to do. Soren nodded, his eyes focused on the view ahead. The shuttle veered toward the asteroid field, the massive rocks floating in the void like silent sentinels. The ship's engines hummed as they gathered speed, but the Empire was relentless, tracking their every move. Minutes passed, and the shuttle raced toward the field. The hum of the engines grew louder as the crew worked together to keep the ship steady, weaving between the giant asteroids. It was a delicate balance, moving fast enough to stay ahead of the enemy, but not so fast that they would crash into the massive rocks. Hold on, Soren shouted as the shuttle banked sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding a collision with a large asteroid. The force of the turn threw everyone to the side, but they held on. Zora clenched her fists, her eyes locked on the path ahead. The Empire's ships were still gaining on them. She could almost feel their presence in the cold emptiness of space, their deadly pursuit just behind them. This is it, Harris said, his voice tight with anticipation. We're almost through. The shuttle flew faster now, the asteroid field opening up before them. But just as they thought they might escape, A sudden blast of energy rang out. One of the Empire's ships had fired, its lasers narrowly missing the shuttle. The force of the blast shook the shuttle violently, sending sparks flying from the control panel. "We're hit," Harris yelled. "Shields are down to 30%. "Stay with me," Soren barked. "We can do this. We just need to make it through the next few minutes." Zora's mind raced as the shuttle continued to weave through the asteroid field, the Empire's ships still in hot pursuit. They were close, so close to escaping, but the Empire was relentless. The shuttle shuddered again as another blast hit, this time causing the lights to flicker. "Captain," Harris called out, "we're not going to make it if we don't lose them now." Soren gritted his teeth. They had no choice. "Prepare for a sharp turn," he ordered. "Hold on tight." He slammed the shuttle into a hard turn, banking left just as the Empire's ship fired again. The shuttle swerved between two massive asteroids, the blast missing by inches. They had done it. They had lost the Empire, at least for now. As the shuttle slowed, the crew let out a collective breath. They were alive. The danger was not over, but they had made it. For now, they were safe. But Zora knew this was only a temporary victory. The Empire would not stop until they were wiped out. They had to keep moving, keep fighting. The shuttle flew deeper into the asteroid field, the crew now focused on survival. The battle was far from over, but one thing was clear: they were not going down without a fight. And for the first time in a long while, Zora allowed herself to believe that they might just win this war. The shuttle floated in the dense asteroid field, its systems strained from the harrowing escape. The hum of the engines was quieter now, a welcome sound of survival. The Empire's fleet was still out there, but for the moment, they had slipped through their grasp. Zora stood near the cockpit, her eyes scanning the view screen, watching the countless asteroids drift past. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were just biding their time, waiting for the next move. Soren approached her, his face weary but determined. "We're safe for now, but we can't stay here forever. We need to find a way out of this field and head for the closest allied system." Zora nodded, still unsure of what to think. The humans had saved them, but their escape felt like a temporary reprieve. She knew the Empire would come after them with everything they had. But she also knew that now, more than ever, they had to be strategic. The fight wasn't over. It had just changed. "How much longer until we can jump to hyperspace?" she asked, turning to face Soren. Harris, who had been working on the ship's systems, spoke up from the back. "It'll take a few more minutes to fully recharge the engines. We're almost there, Captain." Soren nodded. "Good. We'll make our move as soon as we can." Zora could feel the tension in the air. The rebels had been through so much, and now they were relying on the humans to get them to safety. But even if they made it to the next system, would it be enough? The Empire wasn't just going to let them go. They would hunt them down until the last rebel was dead. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "Captain Soren, this is Harris." The voice came, slightly distorted. "We've got incoming transmission. It's from the Empire." Zora stiffened, her heart racing. She looked at Soren, who was already moving toward the comms console. "Put it through," Soren said, his voice steady. The screen flickered to life, revealing the cold, imposing face of an Empire commander. His dark eyes narrowed as he addressed them. "You've made a mistake, human," the commander said, his voice low and menacing. "You think you've escaped, but you're wrong. The Empire will hunt you down, no matter where you hide. You've just signed your death warrant." Soren didn't flinch. "You're wasting your time, Commander. We're already gone. You'll never catch us." The commander's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Oh, we'll see about that. You may have escaped for now, but your rebellion is weak. Your survival is temporary. Soon, you'll all be nothing but dust." The transmission cut off, leaving only the static buzz in its wake. Zora felt a chill in her bones. The Empire wasn't just making threats. They meant it. And now they knew that the humans were involved. The stakes had just been raised. "We have to move now," Zora said, her voice firm. "We can't wait around for them to catch up." Soren nodded, a look of resolve on his face. "Harris, how long until we can jump?" "About 5 minutes, Captain. The engines are almost ready." Zora took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had never been one to run from a fight, but she knew that they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The Empire would be on their heels soon, and they had to make every second count. "We'll jump as soon as we can," Soren said, turning to the crew. "We'll get to the nearest Allied system, and then we'll regroup. The rebellion isn't over. This is just the beginning." The crew moved quickly, working in unison to prepare the shuttle for the jump. Zora could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking a stand, showing the Empire that the rebels, and the humans who stood with them, weren't going to go down quietly. As the engines powered up and the stars began to streak across the view screen, Zora allowed herself a small, cautious smile. They had made it this far. They were still alive, still fighting. And as long as they had breath in their lungs, they would keep fighting. The turning point had come. Now it was time to take the fight to the Empire. The stars streaked past the shuttle's windows, a blur of light as they entered hyperspace. Inside, the crew was silent, each person lost in their thoughts as the hum of the engines filled the air. Zora stared out at the swirling lights, her mind racing with what had just happened. They had narrowly escaped the Empire's clutches, but their journey was far from over. She turned to Captain Soren, who sat at the helm, his hand steady on the controls. His face was calm, but Zora could see the tension in his eyes. The Empire had made their threat clear. They would stop at nothing to destroy the rebellion. And now, they had made it personal by involving the humans. "We made it," Zora said quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice was tired, but there was a hint of hope in it. "But the Empire isn't going to give up. We have to plan our next move." Soren nodded without looking at her. "We need to get to the nearest Allied system. Once we're there, we can regroup. But we have to move quickly. The Empire won't stop chasing us." Zora sighed, glancing over at the other rebels, who were sitting in the back of the shuttle. They looked drained, some with their heads bowed, others with their eyes closed. The rebellion had been their cause, their reason for fighting, but now they had lost so much. So many had died, and they had been left to die on Sandros. Now, they were starting over, with nothing but the promise of safety from the humans. Zora's thoughts were interrupted when Harris, the ship's second-in-command, walked over to Soren, his expression tense. "Captain," Harris said, "we're getting a transmission from the rebel forces. They've confirmed they're ready for a rendezvous." "Good," Soren replied, his tone firm. "Prepare to exit hyperspace in 5 minutes. We'll meet them there." Zora felt a small flicker of relief. A rendezvous with the rebels was exactly what they needed. They couldn't do this alone. But her relief was short-lived. Her mind returned to the Empire's threat. They would catch up with them eventually. And when they did, the consequences would be deadly. "We'll have to move fast," Zora said, more to herself than anyone else. "We'll need to be ready to fight. The Empire won't let this go." Soren looked at her for the first time, his expression thoughtful. "I know. We'll be ready." The shuttle emerged from hyperspace, the dark expanse of space stretching out before them. Ahead, the distant glow of a nearby planet slowly came into view. Zora could feel the shift in the air, a change in the tension around them. They had made it this far. But now, the real test would begin. As the shuttle entered the atmosphere of the Allied system, the crew prepared for what lay ahead. They would meet with the other rebel factions, regroup, and plan their next steps. But Zora couldn't help but feel that the real war was only just starting. The Empire was ruthless, and they had already shown that they were willing to do whatever it took to destroy the rebellion. But there was something else that kept Zora's spirit from breaking. Something that had changed in her since she had first met the humans. They weren't just allies. They were more. They had proven that they would stand with the rebels, no matter the cost. And together, they might have a chance to finally defeat the Empire. "This isn't the end," Zora said, her voice steady. "It's only the beginning. We fight until the Empire is defeated. And we do it together." Soren nodded, a rare but genuine smile tugging at his lips. Together. As the shuttle touched down on the planet, Zora stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. The battle for the future was far from over. But now she wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. The shuttle landed softly on the planet's surface, its engines quieting to a hum as the doors opened. Zora stepped out first, the cool air of the new world rushing in to meet her. Her boots crunched softly on the dirt, and she paused for a moment to take in the surroundings. This wasn't home, but it was safe. For now. Behind her, the rest of the crew filed out. The human soldiers, dressed in their tactical gear, moved with precision. They were a calm presence amidst the storm of emotions that raged inside Zora. Her people, the survivors of Xandros, followed her out of the shuttle, their faces showing signs of both exhaustion and hope. Soren was the last to exit. He looked around the clearing, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. "We're safe for now," he said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of what they had just escaped. "But we don't know for how long. The Empire won't give up." Zora turned to him, her eyes fierce with determination. "We'll make them give up." She knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to defeat the Empire. They had seen too much destruction, too many betrayals, and too many losses. But they still had something that the Empire didn't: hope, courage, and the will to fight for what was right. The rebel survivors began to gather in small groups, their weary faces lit by the soft glow of the new planet's sun. They spoke quietly amongst themselves, sharing stories of the battles they had fought, the friends they had lost, and the dreams they still held on to. For the first time in a long while, Zora saw something in their eyes, a glimmer of hope that she hadn't seen before. The humans, too, were talking with the rebels, offering assistance, and sharing their expertise. It was clear that the alliance between the humans and the rebels had begun to take root. Zora had once doubted the humans, wondering if they were just another group of soldiers looking to use the rebellion for their own gain. But now she knew better. They had saved them. They had risked everything to bring the rebels to safety, and they had shown the true meaning of loyalty and honor. Captain Soren walked up to Zora, his face serious but compassionate. "We got some time before the next move. We should gather the leaders of the rebel factions. It's time to plan." Zora nodded. "We've lost so much, but we still have a chance. This is our new beginning. We need to show the Empire that we're not just a scattered group of rebels. We are a force to be reckoned with." Soren smiled slightly, his eyes filled with respect. "You're right. Together, we can do this." As the rebels and humans gathered, forming a circle of unity, Zora felt a surge of emotion rise within her. She had led her people through so many trials, and now, for the first time, she felt like they were truly united. The Empire had made a mistake. They had underestimated the will of the people. And now, with the humans by their side, they would fight back with everything they had. The planet before them was a new home, a place to rebuild, a place to find strength again. But Zora knew the war was far from over. There would be more battles, more challenges, and more sacrifices to make. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wasn't afraid. "We fight for freedom," Zora said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and we fight because we have something worth fighting for." The crowd erupted into a chorus of cheers. The rebellion had a new purpose, and it was stronger than ever before. For the first time in a long time, Zora felt the weight of the future lift off her shoulders. They were no longer a scattered group of survivors. They were a united force, ready to take on the Empire and show the galaxy that humanity and the rebels would never back down. The legacy of the brave was just beginning, and Zora would lead them all to victory.